Today's dedication is for Terax, who gave me a very generous 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon. Kotis the Fangkeeper versus Aetherdrift, Lazav, and Doran. Well, that Aetherdrift should be fun to play against, and we have a no lander, which isn't a good start for us, into multiple lands and a bit of ramp, which should take us into a reasonably fast commander. Oh, I thought this was the other more expensive modern Aetherdrift, not the proliferate one, fair enough. Not as worried about that, although maybe we should be worried after all. That is an infect creature from Aetherdrift. Draw another land, so let's try and fix our colours. Didn't put the Surveyor lands in here for whatever reason, so just grab a Tricycle land. Thought Scour from Lazav is mill 2 and draw a card. Decided to mill us, so cleared a couple of lands off the top for us, which is very kind. Black Belly Rat, that is toxic, but still gives poison counters. When it dies, proliferate, and the infect goes on to the Lazav player. Once we've each got one poison counter, we have to start worrying about the proliferate from Aetherdrift, of course. There is an Arcane Denial, so could maybe hold that up on turn 3 to counter the Aetherdrift, assuming that that's when it comes down. Although now that we're a turn ahead on mana, it might be worth just getting down our commander instead and trying to outrace him. A Hedron Crab for some more mill, just as a basic, so the swamp comes in and it's going to mill the infect player, gets rid of Ozolith, Contagious Nim and Skrelv. Innkeeper's Talent is a class for the infect player. At level 1 at the beginning of combat on your turn, a plus counter on a creature. And then it's only 1 mana to level 2. Permanents with counters on them have ward 1. So plus counter on the infect creature. With toxic, the buffs don't matter. You only ever get 1 counter in this instance, but with infect the buffs do matter. So alright, surprised he's not getting infect on the other 2 players while he's got the chance. Instead it is a 2-2 and a 2-2. So up to 4 infect over there. So hopefully we can get down our commander here and it won't have a Swords to Plowshares pointed at it by Doran. Priority is being held up by Doran. Doran's still just holding up the mana here, so decided not to get the commander in. Another land played into Hedron Crab and milling the infect player again. So we see a land, Teferi Master of Time and Venerated Rock Priest, followed by a Mind Funeral onto the same player. So there it's lands, Hand of Praetors, Whisper of the Dross, Experimental Augury, Necrogen Rock Priest, and a Tekuthal. So 74 cards left in his library, 4 cards left in hand. And we've got an indestructible creature in the way of our opponent now at least. If he taps out again, we could always swing in and steal some more stuff over there. Problem of course is, as we all know, Magic Online, that players love to scoop, so we'll have to spread the damage with this thing so that if a player does scoop and take all his permanents with him, we'll still have some stuff left over. Levelling up the Innkeeper's Talent, played a tap land, whatever that's meant to be. Oh, it's a Myriad Landscape. Now we need to be wary of Infect as well, actually. It acts as Wither, so we couldn't block this if we wanted to keep our commander. Could block the Blight Belly Rat though. Plus counter goes on the 2-2 toxic one, so like I said, no matter how much this gets buffed, it's only ever 1 poison counter it will deal. So that comes in at us, that's fine, we've got an indestructible, so don't care about blocking that. The 2-2 Infector goes in against the 0-2 Hedron Crab, and Hedron Crab deciding to block the 2-2, so no Infect dealt here. Okay, that's alright, a slip out the back, so we can play the Hammer of Nizam. We've already got indestructible, but this buffs power and cheats the equip costs as well. So get the Mysterized Village into play, which is a new one from the new set, makes spells uncounterable if you've got the surplus mana. So now have a 4-1 commander, and we're not going to have a blocker, so have to be wary of Infect, or we might have blockers depending on what we hit here. Hopefully don't just see a bunch of lands. So hit for 4, that's 4 commander damage, and we'll look at the top 4 cards here. Wouldn't you know it? We mill 4 lands, so that's great. Doran comes into play on turn 4 instead, so I'm assuming that he's got some kind of protection for it. Tamiyo Safekeeping or something like that. Zer's Weirding for the Dimir player, so we all play with our hands revealed. And if a player would draw a card, they reveal it instead. Any player may pay 2 life, and if they do, it goes into the graveyard. Otherwise they draw it. So the Dimir player also has in hand some spot removal, hull breaker, and a toxic deluge, which is going to affect our Kotis here. Luckily we can see it coming, so we've got the Arcane Denial, phase out would help with that as well. The Infect player has a Jarni Sleeper Agent, a counter spell, doesn't have double blue, and a Skrelv's Hive. And then for the Defender player it's a Heap of Mana, load of lands and a Commander Sphere, a Gorm and Ikra Shadiki, revealing a Glistening Sphere. I'm not going to bother paying 2 life, you can have that. Deciding against cracking the Myriad Landscape, so not going to make double blue for that counter magic. Instead goes up to level 3 with this. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many on instead. So we could potentially get a lot of Infect counters here. Putting the couple of plus counters on the Infector, so this will deal 8. In fact, they could just one-shot someone here, couldn't they? Which would be fun. Luckily, going after the Dimir player and not us. So that gets rid of the enchantment over there, the Toxic Deluge as well. Have to remember that there's a counter spell over here. That's the only real thing to be concerned with, I think. But that player goes up to 14, could have one-shot someone for 10 Infect there. Does play an island, I thought that was a swamp. So do we use this now in order to buff our commander? If we're going to have counter magic held up anyway, I think that's fine. It's a bit greedy, but we want to definitely be hitting things and not clearing a bunch of lands off the top of our opponent's libraries. Didn't get the Glistening Sphere into hand, by the way, someone must have paid 2 for it. And it's not whether we phase out, you do phase out the equipments as well, but they will reappear at the beginning of the turn. There's a Collective Resistance, so let's just go for the Thran Power Suit straight away. Triggers the Hammer of Nazam when it enters, so that will get an equip for free, which is why we threw it on in the first place. So this is now a 7/4 Indestructible with Ward 2. This will put our opponent on 11 points of commander damage, and again we just hope that we hit creatures here. Otherwise we're going to get one shot next turn most likely. You'd think there'd be plenty of creatures in an Infect deck. Well, there we see an Atomize, there's a Spark Double, and a Thrumming Bird as well. So let's go for destroying the Infector, and it does have wards so we can pay for that. Thrumming Bird, fine, and Spark Double. We can't pay for the two mana cost spells in our hand anyway, so we might as well pay the ward on something. Spark Double enters. And then is this the one that doesn't care about legends? Yeah, it's not legendary, so we might as well make another Indestructible here, I suppose. And we just so happen to have creatures to proliferate the plus counters onto now as well. So I'm hoping the Infect player doesn't scoop on us. We proliferate with Atomize, so add counters to the commander and the copy of the commander. Neither of his opponents have Infect counters on them yet, which they probably should. There's an Essence of Antiquity, which wasn't in our opponent's hand previously, so I think he must have just drawn it. That is a 1/10. Doesn't have a means of swinging in with it yet this turn though. Deciding to turn in sideways with the Doran, so hitting the Infect player might become a 2v1 this. Problem is I want to hit this guy so that we can try and spread our permanents about, like I said. Because once we take the Infect guy out, he takes all this stuff with him. And out comes a Traxxas, Praetor's Voice. We don't have any means of unblockable or anything like that at the moment. Plus counter going on to the Atraxa, so we'd have to start worrying about commander damage soon. Alright, decides to swing in with this, which suggests he's not going to block with it. He won't be able to. So takes it in towards the 110. I'm not sure if he realises how Toxic works. Doesn't work like Infect. So that's just a block and no Wither counters go on there. Obviously this deals 10 damage as opposed to just the 1. Maybe he wanted the Proliferate. This is where he'll regret not getting Infect counters on his opponents as soon as he can though. So this has jumped up to an 8/8. We've still got an 8 power commander ourselves. So yeah, they still can't block us if they want to keep their commander in play. Of course, and then they've got Proliferate at the end as well, I forgot about that. So we'll need to be buffing our commander, or at least giving it some kind of unblockable. A Swiftfoot Boots will give us a bit of a buff. So that will come in and go on to the Kotis. Won't be enough though. Only a 9/6 unfortunately. Yeah, so maybe should have countered the Atraxa with the Arcane Denial. But I just wanted to keep that counter spell to try and keep my board intact, just in case there's some kind of wipe. No point swinging in unless we want to try and go wide, which maybe we could have done, I suppose. I'm hoping that the defenders are going to keep going in over here, although they've got Death Touch to concern themselves with now. Each creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. That's fine because we've got a couple of indestructibles, so that's actually really good. Acts as a nice one-sided board wipe. We'll lose the Thrumming Bird. I'm not going to put any of our cards into keeping it in play. Alright, so that player just decides to scoop. So this is a quick game, isn't it? And notice how he took his cards with him, so we've only got one indestructible to block with here. Decides to swing in with the 110. I mean, if he's going to swing in with both, then he might be able to get the 110 through, but he'd lose out on his Doran. Alright, there's a Damnation, so that's what we have to go for here. Again, with the indestructible on our commander, it means that we can go for board wipes like that and make sure that we get through. So that would have helped us against Atraxa regardless. He might have scooped to the board wipe anyway. Hopefully our opponent doesn't scoop here. Dealing 9 commander damage to our opponent. And so we've got access to Reaper of Sheoldred, which is more Infect, Indomitable Ancients, Lifecrafter's Bestiary, Phyresis, Dust to Dawn, and Maha. So I don't think it matters what kind of order we do this in really. And then we'll leave the Dusk till Dawn in exile once we've done everything else, making sure the Bestiary comes out first. Not that it matters because we have to cast into that. This does mean that we're not holding up the Arcane Denial, but we've got Hexproof, so hopefully our opponent doesn't get into a Farewell or something like that. We do now have the 10 power and Infect on Kotis, so our opponent goes down next turn anyway. So it's round to our turn. Scry 1 from the Bestiary. And there is a Sword of Forging Frontier. So keep that on top and draw into it. I'm going to assume our opponent can't get us here, so I should play and equip the Sword of Forging Frontier, but I'm going to assume that we've got it. So just turn in with everything. Could be that he's got to Settle the Wreckage or something, but we've got Arcane Denial for that anyway, so yeah, well, we didn't really see much from Kotis there, so if this is the one you're seeing, as ever, it's the best of a bad bunch, but I'm going to get straight on to trying another game here. Kotis the Fangkeeper versus Piru, Thrakus, and Winota. This is bracket 3, so I'm interested to see that Winota list. And a 1-lander, obviously we mulligan. And that is, that's a slow keep. I think I have to mulligan that as well and try and get into some ramp, even if it means going down a card. Well, Sol Ring and Nature's Law is ramp. So let's keep here and get rid of the Death Begets Life. And then we're first in the turn order. We are going to draw on our first turn. And there's even more mana with an Ancient Tomb, which is one of our game changer cards. So turn 1 Sol Ring, hopefully we can keep that in play for an entire turn cycle, even though we're up against red players. In fact, I'll get the Inquisitor's Flail down while we can, even though it's not going to do anything for a while. Flying and Vigilance on a non-human creature. Birds of Paradise for the Rakdos deck. After which it's straight round to our turn. Cultivate. What can we do here? We definitely need green. So make that a tropical island. And then if we go for an untapped green with the Nature's Law, we can go Cultivate as well, so we'll do that. Going to empty our hand quite quickly though, so we need to try and start getting into our equipment. This is a Voltron variant. And another non-human creature. Eddy Trail Hawk is a 1-2 flyer, gets energy when it enters. And the 1-2 Vigilance swings in towards us. Harrow on turn 2 for the Golgari deck, so gets a couple of untapped lands into play with that, which he uses to tap down into a Gruul Signet. White mana being held up, so we just have to hope that we don't see exile really, because we're on an indestructible commander. Another land for us we don't necessarily want to see. So play the forest because our opponents know about that. Can't hold up the Sink into Stupor unfortunately, so we might as well equip up the Flail and hope that our commander survives. 1-2 swings in down the middle this time, and then pulls it back and sends both of them in at us. He has got down a 1-1 flyer as well here. Whenever it attacks, you may tap a target creature. Rhythm of the Wild, and has played a land that cares about starting your engines. It will tap for 2 when it's at max speed. Has got the speed up to level 2 here. Oh, and that's because he decided to crack the Bloodstained Mire. He couldn't have responded to the land coming in anyway. So gets himself a Surveyor land over here and keeps the card on top. I'm guessing that we don't have Path or Swords over here though, because he had the white mana available and didn't use it on our commander there. A land tax in order to, well, he's last in the turn order, so he'll be able to consistently get basics into hand. And not playing a creature means that he's wide open for our commander. We just draw into another land. We've got a soft counter in Sink into Stupor, which might not be all that useful against swords and the like, but we can make them play it twice maybe, or maybe they don't hold up the mana in order to do that. So we have to go to the right, and we're dealing double damage thanks to this thing at least, so got a bit more of a chance of actually getting something with Kotis. Just played a game in which we just cleared 3 lands or 4 lands off the top doing something like this. There is a Braid, an X-Spell doesn't do anything, and a Boros Reckoner, so just play the Reckoner. We'll leave the X-Spell in exile. A Braid. Do we want 3 damage on something? Yeah, I think 3 damage onto this is fine so that they can't give Winota or any other problem creature flying. Oh, there's actually a Tempt with Mayhem as well. Choose an instant or sorcery. Each opponent may copy that spell and choose new targets. Alright, so might as well go for that. Onto the Abrade. Or actually, they can destroy our equipment then, so best not. Alright, and that player just decides to scoop, as so often happens. This is going to be the problem. You might be seeing 2 short games in a row with this commander. This is what I was worried about on Magic Online. As soon as you start stealing your opponent's stuff, they just scoop, because it's an absolutely heinous act. Players on Magic Online, typically, they don't like targeted discard, they don't like mill, and they don't like it when you steal their stuff. And frankly, it's getting worse and worse as the years go by. They don't like spot removal or anything like that either. Oh, and this thing is still in play, because he quit with the Abrade on the stack, so let's take a turn off with Winota then. Let's bounce it back to hand. Yeah, I really like the idea of this commander, but I just don't think we're going to get any interesting games with it, unfortunately. I don't think I played a land last turn either, did I? Anyway, I imagine all this swings in at us. So they've got a Vigilance creature they can chump with. That's 1 fewer creatures that they swing in Winota with, though. Thrakus the Butcher, another commander, comes into play. That is, it does have Riot, so has haste and trample. When it attacks, double the power of each dragon. So it turns into a 6/4. The speed goes up to 3. They've got Castle Garenbrig in play now as well. Birds of Paradise is untapped. So which blocker do we want to take out? Well, any we want now with an Assassin's Trophy. So I think we're more likely to hit creatures here. It could be that this is a dragon deck. We could get some decent dragons. But I think we're more likely to get half decent blockers here. So let's go Assassin's Trophy onto Winota. And like I keep saying, it could be that we give him white mana for a swords or something, but we just have to play to our outs here. Make sure to play a land, because I think I missed a land last turn. And he went and got a red mana over there anyway. So turn into the left against Winota to deal 4 more commander damage. And there we see another Sol Ring, that is Devilish Valet. A Sizzling Soloist as well. Whenever another creature enters, target creature an opponent controls can't block this turn, yeah. So none of this will really help us apart from getting some blockers in. Winota back into play again. And you have to assume that all the attacks are going to be coming in at us. Although Winota might paint a target on its own head soon. Triggers twice, can tap down a blocker on the way with the Nibelus Avern. And gets himself into a Baird, which is at the beginning of your upkeep. You get a token, that's not a human token, so it will trigger the commander. And a Dawnbringer Cleric. Exile a card from a graveyard. They could have humans enter that can exile creatures, which would deal with our commander. Destroying an enchantment would probably be a good idea to get rid of Rhythm of the Wild. And yes, he does correctly do that. The Nibelus of the Urn is tapping down our human citizen, and we can just block the 2/2 with the 1/3. This player decided to scoop as well, so there we go, Magic Online. A Tear Asunder means that we can get that Winota out of the way and take another shot at it. So just swing in with the commander, deal 4 damage again, and this time we hit a Fallagy Vanguard and an Honoured Crop Captain. Not seeing any flyers though. Okay, and our opponent decides to scoop there, so yeah, like I said, I'll put these 2 games back to back and we'll test to see if anyone actually cares to watch Kotis, but I think this is going to be one of those commanders that people just will not play against because they don't like you playing their stuff. If there is any interest in this commander, then I will try it again, but I don't think we should be getting our hopes up for this one with Magic Online players, unfortunately. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video regardless. If you did, then be sure to leave it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Massive thank you to the patrons as always. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.